Aloha, this is Richard Gobert. I'm a Hawaii real estate broker with eXp Realty. As many of you know, I've been selling real estate in Hawaii for 16 years. Prior to that, I worked for 35 years as an aerospace engineer. Today, I'm going to share some information with you about the impact of the coronavirus on the Kauai and Maui real estate markets. I've picked those two islands, Kauai and Maui, because those are the two that I continue to work with in terms of home sales. I live on Maui and I own properties on both islands. And both islands, I should say, their primary business is tourism. And of course, tourism in Hawaii right now is almost down to zero. So what's the impact on sales? I'm going to discuss that, the impact on prices, and talk about what the future holds. First of all, let's take a look at Kauai and the number of sales. So the bars you see here do represent the number of sales, with the orange being for condominiums and the blue being for residential or homes. And then the dotted lines are the trends that are applied over the last 12 months. So the effect of the coronavirus, of course, would be expected to show up in perhaps these last 2 months. February was when it really began to get a lot of attention. And then March and April, we might expect to see an impact. So number of sales, interesting, in March, the number of sales was up for both condominiums and for homes. But then in April, we did see a drop off there. So my assessment is that yes, the coronavirus is having an impact on the number of sales on Kauai. What about Maui? Well, let's take a look at Maui. We got the same drop off for condominiums here in April, but it's interesting that there's no drop off in home sales for the month of April. In fact, it's pretty consistent last 4 months, January, February, March, April, no drop off in home sales. Of course, the month of May isn't complete yet, so we don't have the May bar on here. However, I would expect the number of sales to be down once I do the next update to include May. All right, so that's the number of sales on both islands. What about prices? Let's take a look at that. Back to Kauai. Okay, so on the vertical axis here, I have the actual sales price of those properties that sold. And then I have the 12 months over the horizontal axis here. The 4 bars for each month, we want to focus our attention on the dark colored, solid bordered bars. So here the orange would be for condominium sales. And then let's skip over the dotted line one, although let me mention what that is. That would be also condominium sales, but it would be the average price, whereas this is the median price. And then for homes, we got the median price, which is the dark blue, and then the very light blue with the dotted outline would be average. And we're going to see as we go through here why we real estate agents focus on median and not averages. And since we do focus on median prices, the dotted trend lines here are for medians, not for averages. So again, let's go over here, March and April. What do we see going on? Well, for condominiums, let's back up another month. February was a good month for prices, but it did drop off in March and further drop off in April. What about homes? Less severe for homes, a modest drop off. February was a high point, and then a little bit down in March, and again, just a little bit down in April. So my assessment of this is Although the number of sales on Kauai is down substantially, it's only having a modest impact on home prices, although a more pronounced impact on condo prices. What about Maui? Since the two islands are similar in terms of what their business is, which is tourism, we might expect them to be similar. Let's see what Maui says. Okay, so let's go over here to the months of March and April. And let's focus on condo prices first. You know, this is not at all like Kauai. Kauai, the condo prices were declining pretty steeply. Here we still see prices going up. So that's interesting. What about home prices? Okay, the dark blue. Home prices were up pretty substantially in March. They did tail off a little bit in April, but you know, we always get a little bouncing around. Look back here, you know, each month some bouncing around. So this is just typical bounce the way I see it. So I don't see Maui as having much of a price impact at this point. But each island has different regions. We have our regions heavily that are heavily tourism related, and then we have those where the majority are mainly residential without much in the way of tourism. So let's take a look at those regions. Back to Kauai, residential only. Now this is actually Lihue, because there's very little vacation rentals in Lihue. It's primarily residential. So what's going on there? Condos. Okay, let me scoot over here to the right side. Okay, just as when we looked at the entire island, yes, certainly for the month of April, condo prices did take a tumble. Home prices, well, they seemed to take a tumble in March, but actually bounced back in April. And as we talked about before, you know, there's typical some bouncing around even without the coronavirus. So this, I look at this and I can't say that there's been an impact on the coronavirus on home prices yet. So we need a little more data to know for sure. And by the way, when we first got started here, I mentioned that we realtors focus on medians and not averages. And that's because look over here at these averages for condominiums. The median is way down here, whereas the average is way up here for the month of July. Similarly, for August, month 8, the median price is down here, but the average is way up here. Why is that? Well, we have a high-end resort called Timbers in Lihue, and those sale prices can be extremely high. We had one that sold for almost 10 million, just one property for almost 10 million. So that really pushes the averages up. But that doesn't mean that that's the average price a person could expect to pay. Really, the median price is really what a person thinking about buying would be expected to pay. Okay, enough said. Let's move on to Maui. Okay, here's Maui. We don't see those spikes here like we did before. Well, yes, that's true. Let's scoot over here to March and April. Okay, what's happening with condominiums? Well, it was here, then it moved down to here, and then it moved back up here. Okay, so I think that's kind of what we saw for the whole island. But anyway, so residential, the residential areas, the condominiums actually bounced up in April. But again, we go back here and we see all this bouncing, so that's may just be normal bouncing around. How about homes, and which I call residential? You see residential here, that means homes. And homes have been pretty consistent, really. There's not nearly the fluctuation that we see in condo prices. And so really not been much impact in residential areas either. in terms of sale prices. Let's go back to Kauai and look at the tourist areas or the resort areas. All right, so scoot over here to the right. What's going on with condominiums? Well, again, just as we saw for the entire island, they've been scooting down. That seems to be substantial to me, more than just normal bouncing around. What about homes? Yeah, in the resort areas, it does seem like there's a downward trend in homes as well. So that's kind of interesting. And then, as we talked, this average here, this was driven by a $36 million sale, oceanfront home in Hanalei. So again, this is another reason why it's not meaningful to talk about average sale prices in Hawaii. One would not expect on average to pay over $3 million for a home in Hawaii. No. On average, you would expect to pay around $750,000. Okay, that's Kauai. Let's look at the similar chart from Maui, resort areas. Maui, there's Maui. Resort areas, Maui. Okay, so resort areas, hey, condominium prices, if anything, are going up. I'd say mainly they're stable, but if anything, there's a slight upward trend there. Home prices, the dark blue, well, we just got some bouncing around. We got this point in January, and then down, and up substantially, and then back down to where it kind of was in February. So it's hard to say that this shows any impact of the coronavirus. At least that's my assessment of it. So what's our conclusions after looking at this data? First of all, the Kauai and Maui economies depend heavily on tourism, and that's currently near zero. I mentioned that when we first started out here. The number of sales on both islands have declined. That's pretty clear. But sale prices are mixed. Some declines on Kauai, but not so much on Maui. The future. Okay, what do we expect? Another 4 weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll have May data to look at. And I do intend to prepare an update for that. But we don't have that data yet. So what do I think is going to be happening here as the year moves on? Well, first of all, it's really not possible to predict the future with any degree of certainty. And that's really because the future hasn't happened yet. However, one important factor may be the recent Harris survey, which was interesting, showed nearly 1/3 of the US population wants to move to someplace safer. It's an even bigger number in the big cities. About 40% of those living in the big cities want to move to someplace safer. Well, Hawaii fared the best out of all 50 states in terms of the impact of the coronavirus on public health. So perhaps that might be the place that these people are going to be looking for. And if that does happen, then that's going to put an upward pressure on prices and, or at a minimum, certainly provide support to keep them from falling. So have to wait to see how that plays out. But that's a positive factor for those looking at Kauai and wanting to see the prices stabilize or even continuing to rise. Okay, that's it. Please stay tuned for an update with the May data. I'll have that in early June. Meanwhile, stay safe. Aloha and mahalo for stopping by.